I am absolutely blessed today to be joined by Ivy to have a casual chat all about things going on in our magical practice, our lives, and also getting into trends that we are seeing in the witchcraft and occult community. This is going to be a great casual episode to put on in the background. So if you're doing dishes or something like that, this is perfect. So welcome everyone. Welcome Ivy. We are going to be spilling some tea today in this video for sure. So I'm sure most people are familiar with your YouTube channel, Ivy, but in case someone isn't, could you give a little background on who you are and what you have going on project wise right now?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks, Lynn, for having me on your channel. So Lynn and I were chatting offline and we were talking about how I feel like everything is so overproduced right now that I just really wanted a casual chat with a friend to just talk practitioner to practitioner, what's going on in our lives, connecting to our magic and all that. So I'm really excited for a more casual chat that isn't so hardcore. I mean, I've done a lot of interviews where it's hardcore. You've got a set of questions you're going through, you've got a time limit, so I'm glad. But anyways, hello everybody. I'm Ivy. If you don't know who I am, I'm Ivy the Occultist on YouTube and on Instagram. I'm primarily a chaos magician, so that gives me freedom to really practice a lot of different things. So I am inspired by ceremonial magic, folk magic. I'm inspired by, well, literally everything, and then it switches every 6 months. So I can't. I guess I should just stick with the chaos magic label. I'm also a psychic, so I do work with spirits quite a bit as well. What else? What did you say? Projects that we have going on?
Yeah, what do you, anything
Yeah.
you're working on?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Professionally or personally? Because those are two very different things.
I'd love to hear both, honestly, because I'll share some of mine too.
Cool, cool. Okay. I guess I'll start with professionally first. So I'm currently writing my first book, which is really exciting.
Yay!
I'm really happy about it. It's going to be a beginner's guide to chaos magic because it's necessary. It's been asked for by so many people. So I can officially say that I'm working with pagan portals. I've been kind of like not telling that to people because, you know how it gets weird with contracts and stuff,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
now I can finally actually say that I'm working with pagan
Wonderful.
portals to write a beginner book. So yeah, and then I just had an essay that's going to be published in a chaos magic anthology that's going to come out next year. So that's a whole separate thing. I got to actually converse with Peter Carroll, which was like, it was so cool for me. So that was really exciting. So I guess that's my professional stuff going on in the occult world. Of course, I've got mundane professional stuff happening, but I don't think anybody cares about that. So I'm not going to talk about my mundane life on camera. Personally, for my spiritual practice, I've been going through a lot of changes. I don't even know what I want to talk about first, and I also don't want to capitalize the conversation and make
No,
this
you're
too
fine.
long, but about my, personal transformation. But I have
hmm
started working a little bit of angelic magic. I've really deepened my relationship lately to the idea of true will and aligning
Mm.
myself better to that concept. I also have fully dedicated myself to Thoth. I've been working with Thoth for a really long
Awesome.
time. I know you say Thoth. For some reason, Thoth resonates in my
So
brain,
yeah, that totally is
but
valid. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. In my meditations, it's always Thoth, even though I know a lot of people say Thoth. But yeah, I had an incident with Thoth recently that I'll actually share really quick. But I basically had this moment where I was in absolute desperation and I don't come so I've been working with Thoth for almost a year, and actually it's been over a year now, but it's been more of like a casual pursuit, I
Mhm.
would say, not necessarily a full, intense dedication. And then I had something come up where I was in desperate need of something to happen, and I mean it was one of those moments where you get down on your knees and beg, and I was like,
Mhm.
please, if you pull through for me, please, I promise I will fully dedicate myself to you. I'll do whatever you want. I mean, and these are spiritual contracts you should not make when you're desperate, but that's a conversation. And he actually pulled through for me and did the thing that probably made
Wonderful.
1% chance of actually happening. So now I'm like, okay, Thoth, that's it. You and me, you and me. I am so dedicated now. So yeah, and I mean, I could go on and on about shifts happening in my magical practice, but what about you? What do you got going on?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's great to hear, and I'm so glad you've having. It sounds like some positive changes, and definitely some beautiful things coming into your life, like an official book contract. Amazing work going into the anthology. It's wonderful to see a more diverse source of information and opinions on chaos magic. That's going to be amazing to read. I'm really looking forward to that. So what I have going on is I've been really busy this summer Working on presentations, traveling. You were at my Thoth Tarot presentation and my one of my other talks at Mystic South on Thelema. That was awesome. And since then, I gave a talk at the Last Tuesday Society all about Thelemic holidays, which was a huge honor. I definitely love watching Last Tuesday Society presentations, so it was so cool to present there. Um, yeah, and that was available. You could watch as a recording as well. And I think they're in the process of putting that talk up on their Patreon if people are interested to go look that up. But yeah, I have a really huge writing project I'm working on that's keeping me very busy. I still have the YouTube thing going on, of course. Um, but in my personal magical life, I don't get a chance to talk about this very much, but I am scrying the 30 Enochian Aethers with my partner. He's assisting in that operation, and that has been incredibly beautiful. I really love working the Enochian system, and due to some life disruptions, one of my old apartment I was living in developed a flooding issue and mold, so it destroyed a bunch of my stuff. It was a huge deal. So that was a
Wow.
huge disruption in my life, but I'm hoping to get back to the Enochian stuff soon. Um, Additionally, I continue to help run my local OTO group of Star Babylon. So I teach classes and events and rituals and initiations. So I'm trying to get those. And for me, my participation in that, I just love making Aleister Crowley's rituals available to whoever wants them. I think that is so cool. And also teaching classes and seeing that aha moment in people. Coming up very shortly, I'm teaching a class on bibliomancy for free at a local coffee
Oh,
shop. So people could come to that. That should be fun. Um, and then I'm also giving a talk at the um, European OTO organization virtually, so I'm not flying to Europe.
yeah.
um, but yeah, that's what I got going on.
Do you ever think that you will, so I know that you've kind of done freelance-ish lectures, teaching,
Mm.
but do you think that you would ever develop a course yourself, or do you like
Oh,
doing lectures here and there? Because I know some teachers don't want to
hmm.
do the whole school course situation, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never actually thought about that
Oh,
before. I would definitely be open to it. Maybe many years from now. I have too
yeah,
much going
true.
on. But yeah, how about you? Have you considered putting together like a whole lecture series?
Absolutely not. No, no, it's not for me. No, so there were a couple of people at the Mystic South, when I saw your lecture,
Hmm.
by the way, for everybody, okay, it was so good. It
Oh, thank
was
you.
so good. No, I loved it. Yours was absolutely my favorite. And I'm not
Oh
even
my
just
God,
saying that
thank
because we're
you.
friends. You did a really good job. But no, I ran into some subscribers at Mystic South and
Hmm.
they were like, "Oh, I would love for you to present next year." And I was like,
Yeah.
respectfully, no.
Oh,
There's
okay.
no, because first of all, I can't give live lectures. I
Hmm.
I would panic. I can't be up in front of people like that. There's no way I could. I don't ever want people to look at me unless, we're pre-recording right now, so it's
Yeah.
just you and me in this room. But if we were up in front of like 200 people, no way. I could never do that. But as far
Yeah.
as setting up a whole course system, I've seen some of my friends do it, and I think it's incredible, but it's so much work. I
Hmm.
mean, so much more work than you think it is. So I'm just going to respectfully say I'm going to stick to my YouTube channel and I'm going to write books and that's where I'm good at. So
I think
yeah.
that's fantastic. And I often think about like the long-term availability of these videos on YouTube. I think they are awesome and a great resource, but YouTube's not going to be around forever. And I think that's where the value of books coming out and buying occult books when they're available is so important as well. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think about that. Like, are we in a digital dark age? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. And there's so much, I mean, because I've made videos for I think it's been 2.5 years now on
Hmm.
on my YouTube channel. And it's great to be able to make videos, but to write a book is something completely different that I'm exploring
Yes.
for the first time. And there's so much more nuance that I can actually go into in a book, which is great. And I can give resources and I mean, it's just books are elite. I mean, I know we
Yeah.
don't we don't all have time to read a million books a year and it's easy to watch YouTube videos, but I think so much is lost in short form content like TikTok or YouTube or whatever, which kind of leads us into talking about trends. But yeah,
Yeah. You mentioned TikTok. That's our point to transition into it. So, yeah, I'm really interested to hear from your perspective, especially as someone who's online, like myself. What trends are you seeing in magic, in the occult, and witchcraft?
Oh, geez. Okay. So are you ready for a whole long rant? I'll try not to make it too long, but
No, go for it. I want to hear it.
okay. No, I mean, we all know that we've been in the era of eclecticism for a really long time. I think that Wicca dominated the scene for quite some time and people really struggled with the rigidity of it. Nothing wrong with Wicca. I have nothing against that. But I think we saw people breaking away from Wicca and moving
Mhm.
towards eclectic witchcraft because they wanted to be able to do their own thing and develop their own personal gnosis and put a bunch of things in a pot and make their own delicious stew, that kind of energy. And now I think we're starting, even though we're still in the era of eclectic witchcraft, I think we're starting to see there's a lot of people diving into folk magic, getting back into their roots, doing ancestral work. That's really the trend that I see is people wanting to feel more grounded and connected to something because eclecticism is fantastic. I've been an eclectic practitioner, for a long time, but I think there's this feeling with eclecticism where you don't feel rooted in anything, you don't feel
Mm,
grounded. And so I think people are being drawn towards folk practices because it gets them to connect with their ancestors a little bit more, get into, mythology and folklore a little bit more, and the herbs that their grandma may have been using in the kitchen based on the region they grew up in or whatever. And I also think, too, another rant I wanted to go on with this is that eclecticism and folk magic or eclectic witchcraft and folk magic both have this really practical element to it. It's very practical, right? It's
mm,
low magic, magic of the people. And I think I've done a lot of thinking about this because, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too. I've always wondered why ceremonial magic, and I say that as a loose term because obviously there's
mhm.
a million different traditions of ceremonial magic, but why does it never become a trend? Why is
Yeah.
ceremonial magic always hidden, always quiet? Whereas, we see witchcraft as a trend and now we're seeing folk magic rise up. And I
Mhm,
think it comes down to societal pressures and how fast and exhausting our life is just in the
mhm,
mundane world because we've got our 9 to 5s, we've got our kids, we've got our dogs, we've got our, all this stuff. And I think the last thing that people want to do is put their head in a book, so to speak. And ceremonial magic is so much more than that. But it does require a certain level of discipline and amount of time dedicating to your practice that I think people just don't have. And so they want something quick, they want something practical, they want it right now. And so witchcraft or folk magic is really practical and down to earth. It's gritty. You can get your hands in it right away. Whereas ceremonial magic has that process of like transformation, that inner transformation that takes a long time, this dedication. And I think if people were less exhausted in their mundane life, they might be more interested in different ceremonial avenues. But I think because people are so burnt out that they just want something a lot easier to do, a lot more manageable. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing that. It really gives me a different lens to view how I think about things. Um, I guess the way I view it is, I guess for me, I view it as practical and not. I think there's this idea that you do have to dedicate a great deal of time, especially when we talk about things like Kabbalah. There is that tradition of like you have to be a certain age and dedicate, a certain amount of time, and you have to be in a stable place before you approach ceremonial magic. But the truth of the matter is, it's such a wide range of different beliefs and practices that ceremonial magic, in particular my tradition, Thelema, can meet you where you're at. So as it says, as Crowley says, as it says in our literature and so forth, the law is for all. So the law of the Aeon of Horus applies to all of us, regardless of how many books you read or have time to read. And I think that, whether you have whatever amount of time you have, or lack of time, or lack of ability to read, I think that it is available. And that is, I don't know if that's a controversial opinion, but my opinion is, and I've always held this opinion with the occult, spirituality, and religion at large, is that you should be honoring where you're at and the amount of time you have. There are Christians who have never read the Bible, but they go to church on Sundays. There's Kabbalists who have shaky Hebrew, but they still practice. There's Thelemites who have not read all of the holy books, or perhaps have only read the book of the law once and then go about their life. I think whatever time you have to give, or rather take, to learn about your spirituality, religion, will bring beautiful gifts into your life. And for me, it's never been a question of um, whether or not I don't know, there's always this game being played, whether or not someone's practice is valid or they've studied enough to call themselves a Thelemite or ceremonial magician. And I think that's a really dangerous game to play because truthfully, and I've always felt this in my heart, um, if someone does what they can with what they have, regardless of what that looks like, I'm proud of them. I admire that. Because a lot of us, we have families, we're taking care of elderly people, we're taking care of children, we work sometimes more than one job. And ceremonial magic is still for you too. Thelema is still for you too. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I do public rituals through the OTO is so people can just come to those rituals and get those benefits of that healing energy or whatever it may be. And of course, there's always space for someone to take that study further. And for me, I like to make that divide, at least when it comes to Thelema, between
Sure.
someone practicing under, the Aeon of Horus, the laws for all. And your true will may just to be, to get by in life. Your true will may to be an amazing mother or father or whatever it could be. But if you choose to take it in the deeper route and do the great work, yeah, that's a little bit more demanding, or it can be. But yeah, I think that perceived rigidity is sounds like a common thing, but I would like to encourage people against it if that makes sense.
The perceived rigidity, that's exactly what it is, because once you actually go into certain ceremonial magic traditions,
Hmm.
ceremonial magic, it's not as intense as people make it out to be. And it really is, I mean, it's just a spiritual practice that you weave into your mundane life. You have
Hmm.
spirits that you potentially develop relationships with, or, whatever that looks like for you. And there is that stigma of ceremonial magic being, oh my gosh, you have to read 50 grimoires in this year, and then you have to do this crazy
Hmm.
initiation, right? And if you don't do that, you're not valid. And I think that deters a lot of people. And so, yeah, that's really interesting. And even like what you said with true will, because that's something that I've been really ruminating in my mind a lot more with my practice. And we've had conversations on offline
Hmm.
about true will, that it's not about just, you've said this before, it's not just
Hmm.
about doing what you want. I don't know if can I swear?
I'll,
I don't
I'll
know.
bleep it out just in
Oh,
case.
okay. It's not about doing whatever you want. Sorry, I have a potty mouth. I really need to work on that. But it's more about aligning yourself to, your purpose and what you should be doing, and your overall, the way I like to articulate it is the frequency you should be riding, the tidal wave, that works for you. And it's not just about doing whatever you want. And so that in itself is, it has its origins in Crowley, obviously, but you can easily weave that into your mundane life. It's not
Hmm.
hard. I mean, that's literally living your mundane life in a
Hmm.
very esoteric way. And it's not difficult at all. And for me, that's very practical. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah, there's a lot of practical stuff. I mean, even the old grimoires and ceremonial magic, have cures for ailments, using spirits and occult virtues of different plants and properties, to help with the mundane life as well. Making talismans for various practical uses. I mean, those can get kind of complicated, of course, but there's always room for experimentation. And again, your practice should meet you where you're at. I think if you're overexerting yourself, there's really, no need for that. So,
yeah. I wonder, is it just a lack of beginner ceremonial books and just an abundance of beginner witchcraft books that you think that people tend to shy over to, move to witchcraft rather than any other ceremonial tradition? Like, what do you think about
yeah. Yeah, I think accessibility is a big part of that. Yeah,
that?
for sure. We do have some really good beginner books, but they're not as in your face and as coming
Yeah.
out as often as a lot of the witchcraft, especially the eclectic witchcraft, especially the, easy kind of like, oh, here's spells you can do with incense or candles, which are amazing. And I love books like that too. I have a bookshelf with them. I'm always talking about them on social media. I think they're cool too. Um, but truthfully, we don't have that sort of same thing.
Mhm.
I mean, even if you Google, for example, magical holidays, what comes up? The Wiccan Wheel of the Year.
Right.
That's
Right.
right there in your face. And if you're lucky, maybe you'll get some, Welsh traditional holidays or, some sort of folksy kind of thing like that.
hmm
But yeah, you don't see the holy days of Thelema come up.
Yeah, it's so true. So yeah, I think I don't know if I ever foresee any sort of ceremonial tradition. I would love to see it being trendy. Oh, maybe I don't. Maybe I don't want to see it trendy. No, I don't know. I go back and forth on it, because on one hand, you have people, it is more accessible and more
Hmm.
people are coming in, and it creates this wider community, which is sometimes a good thing, but then it's also sometimes not a good thing for the community as a whole. So I
I
don't
think it
know.
would be a good thing. I think we could really benefit for a greater diversity of people and fresh voices and ideas.
Yeah,
I mean, there are, of course, some amazing fresh ideas coming out of, sort of the Jungian side of things and bring that into Thelema. A new research being done on,
right.
Frida Lady Harris or whatever the case. My partner recently wrote a book about Aleister Crowley and agnosticism and the free thought movement, which is absolutely amazing. And that
Yes.
was actually published through Oxford University Press, so it's a very academic book. But yeah, I mean, a lot of us don't have $300 for an academic book, so it would be nice to have something
No.
more accessible and more applicable, like, oh, I have this amount of time to practice. What can I do? I think
Yeah.
that's valid and beautiful that someone's choosing to spend their precious little time on magic and spirituality, whatever that looks like.
Well, yeah, that's so true. And you just kind of brought up another thought for me that even in the YouTube space, there are not a lot of ceremonial magician YouTubers or occult
Hmm.
YouTubers. It's usually witchcraft. And
Hmm.
I think in my own practice, I'm finding more why that is. At least one facet of it is that doing a lot of the work that I've been doing recently, which is a little bit more ceremonial, a little bit more
Hmm.
dedicated to spiritual alchemy and things like that. I can't share that online. It's so easy
Hmm.
for me to do a quick little spell for whatever and post it online for other people to gain inspiration for their witchcraft practice, but I can't upload a video of me talking about the spiritual contracts that I'm currently in
Hmm.
because a part of those spiritual contracts is that I'm not allowed to share that information with other people. And I know that I have a lot of friends that are more like grimoire, traditional ceremonial magicians in that sense, and they
Hmm.
run into the same issues where there's a lot of things that they're doing that they can't share online. And so therefore we have less representation of the ceremonial side of it and
Yeah.
how wonderful it actually is and how it's not super rigid as everybody thinks. But unfortunately, it's just we can't upload that kind of content. So that kind of feeds into the problem.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point and something I obviously battle and think about a lot because I am an initiatory. I have been initiated in several traditions previously in a Golden Dawn tradition and now currently in the OTO. And I do have to be careful with the stuff I share. And I'm obviously not going to spill secrets, not because something bad, I believe something bad will happen, but really for the benefit of my audience and people who perhaps want to go through these initiations one day. If you want to buy, for example, I think it's a book called The Secrets of the OTO or whatever, and read through it, that's your business. But like for those people who want the full initiatory experience, I want to give you that. So I don't talk about those things. And yeah, there are times sometimes when I'm like making a video, like I made a video all about what is initiation in general, and I sort of talk vaguely about everything from Wicca to like OTO to AA, whatever, Golden Dawn. And I talk about like what the spiritual implications are and like kind of questions you should ask or things you can maybe expect but like not specifics. And I kept having to check myself, am I giving away a secret here? Let me tweak this here, so but yeah, I would say a great portion of what I do is not on the internet and will never be on the internet. um
Yeah, that's kind
yeah.
of the same exact thing I'm experiencing, especially moving into angelic magic and working with these new entities that I previously had such a hard time developing a relationship with due to,
Mm.
religious trauma and things like that, and having this full circle moment and working with those entities again. And it just, I can't share a lot of it because it's so personal. I do not want to put that online.
Yeah,
And then,
sure, sure.
I mean, even with this dedication with Thoth, there's some things where he wants me to keep it secret. He wants me to keep it between us. And I of course I want to share everybody because it's so exciting and it's so
Mhm.
fun, but yeah, I just can't share those types of things. So I think we derailed from the trends into something
Well,
else.
the one thing I do want to share though, I guess there is a lot in ceremonial magic, at least in like my Thelemic tradition, that I could film and could like do vlogs about, and I started doing that and I want to return to that. For example, I am on a journey to being a priestess in the Gnostic Mass. And so I guess it took me a really long time to get here because I was struggling. I wouldn't say struggling. I was working through my gender and how I view my gender, especially as a queer person, and like what that means in the context of this particular ritual. Um, and there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about like trans inclusivity in our rituals. People are like, oh, it's gender essentials. It's absolutely not. Like there's a huge concentration in the OTO and locally of queer people and trans folks, myself included. So
Yeah.
I was really struggling like what that meant. And but anyway, long story short, I've decided to become a priestess, and I think I would like to share some of that, what that looks like on the back end. You know, me getting ready before the
Yeah.
ritual, maybe some clips of me doing the Gnostic Mass. I think that would be beautiful. That's on my bucket list of things I want to do. And then I'm pretty sure I can talk about this. I'll get in trouble if I can't. But I am on my way to being a chartered initiator in the OTO, so that means I can do initiations with my side officers. So, um, yeah, I'm pretty excited about those
Oh
things.
my gosh, congratulations.
Thank
That is so
you.
wonderful. I knew that you were going the priestess path. I knew that, but I
Oh,
didn't know
yeah.
the depth of it. So yeah, no, that's really, really exciting.
Thank
So good
you.
for you. Yeah, I think that that is so valuable if you were able to show clips
Mm.
like that of you getting ready and even just talking about your personal thoughts in the moment. Are you
Yeah.
nervous? Are you, like in the moment, talk about what you're thinking. I would love to watch a video like that.
Thank
More
you.
authentic videos that aren't just, I mean, overproduced, over the top. I just want raw cuts. I
Yeah.
just want to see people's lives.
Well, and the
So,
thing is too, like there's a lot of little local traditions, like regionally here, but like also local stuff in the US. I mean, for example, going back to the Book of the Law, like in the Book of the Law, it talks about I'm the blue-lidded, it talks about blue-lidded aesthetics on new wheat, and so a lot of priestesses do their makeup specifically to have really bold blue eyeshadow. And so I mean, like, who would think about that? But I think that's interesting because that's like a piece of culture, right, that not a lot of
mhm,
people would know or see or know. Even if you went to the Gnostic Mass, you wouldn't realize that like the priestesses traditionally wear blue eye makeup in this
yeah.
particular region. You know.
Yeah, I would not anticipate that at all. So that kind of stuff is really cool to know, especially for
Yeah.
me as an outsider.
Thing I intentionally do in all of my writing and videos and teaching is make it available to everyone with solo practitioners in mind, because these tools, these rituals, whatever, I think should be available and can be available to all. I mean, obviously the initiations are private and we have private rituals that are
Yeah.
secret, but like, a lot of the practices I do and this work is for everyone, and I'm just excited to
Yeah.
see people interested and participate however they want. So no initiation required for most of what I do.
So hopefully this is the video that makes Thelema trendy. No, just kidding. But hopefully we can get ceremonial magic just in the limelight just a
Could
little
you
bit.
imagine? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what it would look like. I mean, I'm a
Me
little
neither.
worried, but I think it would be good after
Yeah,
over time.
yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh. Well, you said offline that you were going to talk about fairies. So I want to hear
Look at the
about.
fairies. Okay, so speaking of trends, I do want to bring up the fairies thing because I have been noticing both in the mundane world and magical world a huge uptick and an interest in fairies. It seems like the romantasy genre, see, I got it right, the romantic
Oh,
fantasy genre is really into fairies, but that interest in fairies is also bleeding over into the magical spaces and the occult and stuff, where you're seeing a lot more books come out about traditional fairies. Or working with fairies. I'm seeing pieces online on how to give offerings to fairies and all of this stuff, and I thought that was an interesting trend I came across.
that is interesting because I haven't seen fairies come up in the spiritual communities, but I have seen fairies come up obviously like on Book Talk, the
Mm-hmm.
romantasy. Did you ever, this is a quick side tangent. Did you ever read A Court of Thorns and Roses? That
No, I
whole series?
haven't.
Okay, I
Is it
did.
good? Have you read
Uh,
it?
no, it's not good. Okay, I know I'm gonna get so much hate. There's so many people that are gonna be like, "What? I loved that series because it's like the golden gem right now. Everybody
Yeah.
loves Akatar and that whole series, and I hated it. I'm sorry to burst everyone's bubble, but it was terrible. It was, and yes, okay, for anybody immediately about to comment, yes, I read through the first three books, not just the first one. So I really dedicated myself. Do I like the idea of sexy fairies? Yeah, obviously. Obviously, I really enjoy that idea.
Okay, here's a question though, because I have not read the books.
Mhm.
After you read them, did you feel like you needed to start worshiping fairies or like interacting with them in the real world? Like, I'm wondering, what is there a connection there?
Well, for me, when I was reading the book, it was just bad writing. That's all I could think about. So I don't know.
This is the tea.
I just couldn't get over how, never mind. I gotta stop myself at some point. But no, I don't think so. But that brings up a whole different thing. I wonder how many writers in
Mhm.
fantasy are occultists or witches or whatever, and they're doing a little bit of hypersigil magic or something to kind of weave in this magic of people really feeling this spiritual connection to the characters in the book. I always think about that, and
Yeah,
maybe
that's
that's how they
interesting.
kind of bleed over into the spiritual communities. I don't know.
It makes
But
you wonder. It makes you wonder how those streams cross and how those
yeah.
interests merge. Because I've definitely noticed it with the fairies going on.
Yeah.
I don't do anything with fairies personally. I've never really. I think they're really pretty in some of the artwork I've seen
Yeah.
of fairies, but
Yeah.
I don't have anything else to say about them.
Yeah. Well,
So
have you ever like because fairies okay, so here's my question because I don't know a lot about fairies either. And actually I think there was a seminar at Mystic South that I was not able to go
yeah.
to, but I heard there was a really good one. Because I work with gnomes and I don't know if fairies and fae are synonymous or if fairies are a type of fae. Because isn't fae the giant umbrella term for all
Hmm.
of these fourth dimensional creatures and fairy falls under that umbrella, gnomes fall under that umbrella? I could be wrong because I'm not a folklore expert. Do
Yeah.
you know?
That
Probably not
sounds familiar.
either of
I've
us.
heard that distinction made before that Fae and fairies
Okay.
are separates, and often fairies are a subset of Fae. But I've
Yeah.
also heard other assertions, and so I think that there is some ongoing debate.
Hmm.
So I'm sure someone in the comments will share their opinion very passionately. So please do,
Yeah.
and maybe we will all learn something new.
Yeah, I love the idea of fairies. I really do. I've never personally been called to working with them, but I love hearing about people's practices when they do. I do love my gnomes though, and I feel like that's adjacent. It's under the Fae umbrella.
Hmm.
I've been working with gnomes for the past 3 years now. Because I've always really loved, having little gnome trinkets in my house, and I've always loved the idea of gnomes. But what was it, 3 years or 2 years? I can't remember. Maybe it's only 2 years. But I did a sort of ritual to bring them into my garden, I think
Oh, how
2 years
wonderful!
ago. Yeah, and it's been really, I've had some crazy supernatural things happen in my garden ever since then. And then I
Nice.
started to get more statues, and then I turned them into little talismans, and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing out there now.
That is
So
so cool.
yeah, they help me with my garden, and I've had pumpkins every year since working with gnomes, and I don't
Hmm.
plant pumpkins in my garden. They just sprout out of absolute nowhere. I'm not even
That's
kidding.
amazing.
It's a whole thing. So now pumpkins have become the symbol of my relationship between me and the gnomes. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a whole long story, but it's really fun. It's fun working with fey creatures, especially when, I don't know, you go out at dusk and because I like to walk around in my garden and I'm walking out
Hmm.
and I see things out of the corner of my eye and I'm like, ooh, was that a little something or was that my subconscious mind? I don't know, but I'm not going to question it because it's fun and it's cool. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I actually have a very funny story about seeing things out of the corner of my eye in my new place.
Ooh,
So I see a lot of stuff all of the time. I sometimes get medically concerned about that. I think I am fine. I have been to the doctors. I've had a full psych eval. I'm okay. But it's definitely like, I see a lot of shadow people. I see like a lot of everything. And so
yeah.
late at night, I was enjoying relaxing, playing some Stardew Valley because I've been really excited about the update recently. Update
Yeah.
1.6.
Nice.
Anyway, so I'm playing a little Stardew Valley and I'm seeing stuff out of the corner of my eyes, like little like things happening around me. And I'm like, okay, like that's clearly just like another thing in my head or, something that's not corporeal. Well, anyways, fast forward, I have mice. There were mice living in my new place. So
Oh,
I wasn't hallucinating. They're like imagining or like they weren't like non-corporeal. They were real physical mice just living here. I've
oh,
managed to like get one out of the door. And then yeah, I think they're still here. So that's my story of little things scurrying.
yeah.
Sometimes it's not spirits, sometimes it's mice.
Yeah, that's so unfortunate. I'm so sad for you because I always want a little ghosty action. Sorry that it was actual mice. That's really terrible.
No, I
I feel like,
legitimately thought I did not think they were mice though at first, and I was like, okay, no, I was seeing something physical here running
yeah,
around. So
yeah.
yeah.
Have you always seen the shadowy people out of the corner of your eye, or do you feel like that's increased since your spiritual development?
I think the shadow people. Well, this is an interesting question. I've never talked about this before with anyone. I would say it's sort of like the same. But maybe I saw more of them as a child, which I think a lot of people
Mm.
sort of experience that, like in childhood, you see a
Oh
lot
yeah.
more stuff. Um, but in my occult practices, when I create a space for visions or experiences, amazingly enough, I've had great success, whether it's the Enochian, whether it's some of my thelemic related practices or rituals I've done. Yeah, I've actually had results, pretty wild results, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that's one thing I encounter and see a lot is people just think we're just like all making stuff up and nothing's going to work for them. And there's a lot of rituals, I've done or been a part of where nothing has happened and I've had no benefit. But a lot of the work I have, and that benefit isn't always just like feeling good inside or like
Mhm.
having an awareness about something. It's also sometimes like visually seeing things and things that are quite bizarre, that I just couldn't even imagine. Some things I've never even read about in a written book. Um, I guess I'll just give one example from my
Yeah.
Enochian work, something that I don't know if other people have also experienced, but um, I was interacting with an entity that was humanoid in nature, but had very distinctly non-humanoid features, such as like a face of leaves. Now I know people go,
Oh,
"Oh, the Green Man," but I'm not entirely sure it was the Green Man. It was just more
okay.
more like a strange humanoid kind of thing. Um, but very distinct face and body, like all of this in the vision. And so a lot of my visions are either in a black scrying mirror or with my eyes closed. But, so mind you, I am in a darkened room with two candles outside my periphery. There is no source of light in my face. And my eyes at this point during this vision are closed. But I do like to open my eyes, look into the scrying mirror, look into the room to see what else is going on during these visions to make sure I'm not, missing any cues or something going on. So I'm interacting with this entity. I open my eyes and just like a sunspot. So when you stare at a light or like the sun and then you close your eyes and it's still there, it's like an after image.
Hmm.
He was there, his face especially glowing as an after image, like I'd been staring into the sun.
Wow.
Nothing prepared me for something like that, but that really happened. And I was like, wow, this is, and I'd close my eyes and it was still there, and I'd open my eyes and it was still there. So it was like my retinas had like this image burned into them. I don't know how you describe that. So yeah, it's pretty
Wow.
interesting.
That is so incredible. I love hearing shadow people stories or just,
Yeah.
the seeing things,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes us all feel a little less insane when we're all
Mm-hmm.
insane together. So I appreciate that. No,
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
the same way. As far as like seeing shadowy people out of the corner of your eye, I've always been that person. And I actually, oh my gosh, I have to share something crazy with
Yeah,
you
please
that I
do.
also have not talked about with other people. But so I used to be an incredibly emotional person because of post-traumatic stress disorder, going through a lot of trauma, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. I was a very unhealed version of myself. And so I found myself in this constant state of high highs, low lows, just being a very emotional person. And I found that I saw spirits and shadowy things out of the corner of my eyes a lot more frequently during that time versus now when I am much more stable with my
Mm-hmm.
emotions. I've worked through all of that, trauma and done the shadow work, done the work, to kind of better myself. And it's frustrating because, and I think I know why. I think I know why that's a thing, but it is frustrating because now I want to see all these spirits and these shadowy people, and I have to reach a deep altered state of consciousness in order to do that.
Mm.
Whereas beforehand, when I was very emotional, it was easy and they would just come up
Interesting.
all the time. And I think that's because if you go into the brain structure, I'm not going to use all the scientific terms, but you have your emotional brain and you have your rational brain. And when you're emotional in those moments, it does turn your rational brain off. The prefrontal cortex cannot work properly when you're really emotional. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that our rational mind is the one that applies those filters to the reality that we experience and what we see around us. And so our rational mind is constantly filtering out that stimuli, right? Like it's filtering out
Mm-hmm.
shadowy people and spirits and all of that because we're so rational. And that's why people who are highly rational and critical, they have such a hard time, I find, with spirits and magic and all of that stuff, is because their brain is filtering out those experiences, and it's hard to transcend the rational mind, get deeper into an altered state of consciousness or your subconscious mind in order to perceive those messages. And so when you're emotional, it does kind of turn off the rational a little bit. And so I think you have greater access to the spirit realm when you are emotional in those states. That's what I've personally experienced.
Mm.
And so, yes, I'm happy and proud of myself for moving into a more healthy space and being a lot more stable emotionally. But damn, I'm also kind of bummed because I have to work a lot harder to overcome my prefrontal cortex now, and I have to work that much harder to actually see and perceive spirits. So, anyways, it was just a weird observation
Yeah.
I had. I don't know, but who
That's
knows if
that's really
it's
interesting, and that brought up some thoughts from my perspective as well. And something, one of the benefits, not to like push everyone into ceremonial magic, but one of the benefits of ceremonial magic is with a lot of the rituals, there is so much going on. I'm talking especially
true.
for you people who overthink things or are, very rational kind of thinkers. You
Mhm.
have so many layers of symbolism, of um, correspondences for your rational mind to get tied up with. So there's just so many, oftentimes with the rituals, there's so much going on. It's just you were,
Yeah.
especially the initiations, everything, you're just overwhelmed, right? Like
Mhm.
you're overwhelmed with like the meanings of the colors, the scents, the counting the numbers, the gematria, the ipsopsophy, the words, how they're said, how it's being intoned. The layout of the temple space, all of this is happening, right? And so your
Yeah.
rational mind is like trying to like go down its list of correspondences and like bloop 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 bloop, like an android, like bloop 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 bloop. This is what this means. This is what it, blah blah blah, and that opens up the creative side. That opens up you
Hmm.
to allow you to experience something on a different level.
Hmm.
And so that's one benefit though of some of these ceremonial rituals is you have all the bloop bloop bloops going on, so you're finally free to move past that.
Well, yeah, okay, I'm currently writing, I'm on chapter 4 of my book. Well, no, and technically I'm on chapter 5, but in chapter 4 that I just wrapped up, I was talking about gnosis, altered states of consciousness. I was
Hmm.
talking about excitatory states versus inhibitory states and why it's important to do this for ritual to open your mind up. And what you said is exactly that. It's like an
Yeah,
excitatory state where you're overwhelming yourself with all of these sensations. Your rational mind is trying so hard to figure out what's going on that it gets overwhelmed and you're able to bypass it. And that's a very effective
yeah.
method. Absolutely. It doesn't always have to be meditation and, zenning yourself out. It can be something a little bit more excitatory with all these different correspondences going on and confusing yourself a little bit. And yeah, now I wish I could see one of those initiatory procedures,
Well, you
but
can you can come to the Gnostic Mass. A lot of, I mean,
oh,
that
that's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So the Gnostic Mass is one of our main public-facing rituals of the OTO. We have private Gnostic Masses as well, but the public-facing one, people could just come to. You don't have to join or order or anything. I just say reach out to your local OTO body, see if there's a dress code, if you need to bring anything, if there's a cost. Typically,
Yeah.
it's like $15 or less. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's a potluck. Yeah, just show up and you can experience a whole ritual, a whole
Yes.
ceremonial ritual. But yeah, and that's one thing about, to sort of tie this back into our previous discussion about initiation. As an initiator, one thing I like to think about is getting the candidate to that point of excitement. I don't want to say fear necessarily, but certainly excitement. You want to get them to that sweet spot where they are retaining information more, they're at a heightened state, they're experiencing more, but they're not so overwhelmed and terrified that their brain shuts off and they have an out of body experience. So
Right.
that's one of the techniques we use too during initiations, is getting people to that right state of excitement. Um,
Yeah, we don't need people blacking out and then not being able to remember anything afterwards. That would not
yeah.
be pleasant, not be a pleasant experience. Yeah, I mean, I have experienced something. I don't even know if I would say it's similar, but I am in a coven. We do group rituals, and when
Hmm.
we do it, it's very sacred. We cast sacred space. I'm not going to share what we do. Our rituals are very private, so I'm not going to share,
Hmm.
all the details online. But it's this excited feeling, even when we get into a trance-like state, just being with other people and doing magic together. I cannot stress enough, people watching this that have never done that, I encourage you to find even just one friend or somebody that you can do in-person magic with, that
Hmm.
you can hold each other's hand. You can feel the energy moving back and forth between you two. And even, like I said, even if it's just two people, it's so incredible to feel when you're doing
Hmm.
these rites together or whatever you've developed. And I've never felt such a feeling of belonging in my entire life than doing group rituals with people like that. It brings you to tears, at least in my experience. And it's just so lovely. And I'm sure you could probably resonate with that. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's lovely.
There is such amazing value to doing things in a community, in a group, just another person. And I always think about this is I ask myself, are covens, are groups or orders going to go by the wayside? We have the internet now. Who needs in-person things? I say absolutely not.
Right.
As human beings, we are programmed. We by definition need community. We are social creatures, on this planet. And I think about how all of the weird experiences people pay to have, whether it's a weird dining experience, they go to like a haunted house that, or whatever. I mean, haunted houses aren't that weird, but, in general, like all kinds of experiences people pay to do. And I think it's because we crave novelty, we crave experiences, and yeah, the movement of the energy,
Hmm.
sharing your energy with other people, sharing experiences with other people is so beautiful. And I think there is so much value in bringing practice to the real world, to other people, to a community. Yeah, I'm a big supporter of that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think one of our fundamental needs as human beings is to be accepted for who we are and to be understood and loved and to really feel like we belong somewhere because we're tribal. I mean, if we really get back down to human nature, we are pack animals and we want to belong somewhere. We want to have roots. And when you're doing magic, that's one of the most intimate things in my experience that you can
Mhm.
do with another person. It's so intimate. You're intertwining your spirit with them, your energetic blueprint with them. And yeah, I mean, I think there's very few other activities that you could do on an intimacy level that quite equate
Yeah.
to coven work or doing group work like that. So yeah, I think it's so important. And to what you said with the internet space, is that potentially going to go away? I agree with you. I don't think it's going to go away at all, group work, because there's no replacement for it
Mhm.
whatsoever. I mean, watching a YouTube video or listening to podcasts, not the same. Even, I mean, we have a lot of online meetings in my coven because we're primarily, I would say most of the time we're online because we can't be in person because we live
Mhm.
all over. But we do have retreats that we do twice a year where we get together and we do a lot of magic over the course of 4 days. We rent an Airbnb and we
Oh
just do
my
magic
gosh,
for
I
four
love
days
that.
straight. It's so great. I mean, we do so much stuff together. So that makes it all worth it. But, and I love our online time together. I love when we have
Mhm.
our Zoom meetings and we can do ritual online even, which is fantastic, but it's not the same. It is
Mhm.
not the same as physically holding someone else's hand and feeling their energy. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
not going away.
Yeah, I
No
agree with
way.
that 100%. And I mean, again, like for people listening to this who may be like solo practitioners, like this doesn't have to be necessarily joining an initiatory order. That's
Oh,
not what
sure.
we're saying at all. At least I'm not saying that. Like this can be simply getting a friend or two together for, an equinox or solstice celebration and doing a small ritual or spell.
Yeah.
There's a lot of and if you have no idea where to start, there's a lot of fantastic beginner stuff out there where you can just do like a little tea spell or, you know, go check out Ivy's YouTube channel for inspiration.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I
So
mean, it can be so simple as
mhm,
so I will share one thing that we do. So in our group, I don't think that any of my coven mates will mind, and maybe they'll crucify me after this. I don't know. But no, just kidding. So we do an energy exchange in the beginning of our rituals usually, and what it involves, it's the simplest thing ever. So yeah, okay, we cast sacred space, we
mhm.
have an altar that we set up, there's more ceremonial aspects to it, but when it comes time to actually do the ritual together, whatever the ritual is for, we take a second to sync up and get our energies together. So we would hold hands and then we breathe in. And so this is something that anybody can do with a friend at home. You're sitting on the floor cross-legged, you've got your friend across from you, you're holding hands and you pick a receiving and a giving hand, whichever
Mhm.
resonates for you, and you sit there and you breathe in. And when you breathe in, you're receiving the other person's energy. And when you exhale, you're giving your energy to the other person. And it kind of goes in this circle to
Yeah,
where you can feel the other person's energy. And that's one of the most simplest things that you can do with another person, just breathing together and focusing on receiving, giving, and see how it feels. See if their
I
energy
love
makes you
that.
feel hot or cold or tingly or whatever. Because you'll find, and we've done this a couple times, you'll find that some people, I've had some people make me feel almost like I'm gonna burst with excitement because there's so much energy, and I'm like, ooh. And then other people feel calm and relaxing, and I'm like, okay, I can take a nice little nap or something. So yeah, it's just really interesting. It's a fun exercise to try, and then do a tea leaf reading together or
Yeah,
something.
I love that.
Do whatever. So yeah, it's very accessible. Anybody can do it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. Yeah, you talking about these sort of breathing exercises and movement of energy, passing that around is sounds very familiar in my tradition as well. So,
Oh,
a
really?
lot. Oh yeah,
That's great.
absolutely.
That I love that. I'm sure that what we all do is very similar at the end of the day as far
Hmm.
as energy is concerned. I know the ceremonial aspect of it is probably different. What goes where, what you wear, calling whomever you want into your space. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And this also comes back to this idea of, I guess for me, something I have noticed in the folk magic space, something I'm not huge, I'm not part of that community necessarily, but I see it online. I read, my friends' comments who are folk witches and stuff. But there's this belief that nothing is true, so you can do whatever you
Oh,
want, which is an interesting take on folk magic. So I guess from my thelemic perspective, for me, I'll just throw this definition out. I believe this definition is outlined by Crowley, but magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with will. So, if something works, it works, right? It's sort of like, if it's my will, for example, to get enough vitamin D and like perform well on job interviews or something and not look anemic and like sickly and get enough iron and whatever. I take a supplement, right? Or like watch when I'm eating and make sure I'm getting enough diversity of foods. Like that to me is a magical act. But I mean, but this also extends into doing ritual work and asking myself for me in this context, what is working as a daily practice? What is energizing me? What is calming me down? Whatever effect I'm going for, like, is this working? So this idea that like everything is permitted, everything is true, is in direct conflict with with me and my beliefs as a person. Um, and I think it's at odds with traditional ideas of folk magic as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you comment on what you think that idea is in relationship to folk magic.
I literally just wrote a whole thing about nothing is true, everything is permitted. So yeah, I have opinions. No, that slogan, it's kind of like an unofficial slogan for chaos magic
Yeah.
because and it's a whole philosophical conversation that I'm not even going to go down in this conversation. Like breaking that down, what that means, nothing is true, everything is permitted is a whole philosophical approach. But that does not apply to folk magic because if you are operating from the perspective of nothing is true, everything is permitted, that's chaos magic theory, or
Yeah.
that's a piece of chaos magic theory. That's not folk magic. Folk magic is something completely different. You can call yourself a chaos magician that's maybe inspired by folk magic, which is what I often do. I am very inspired by a lot of different, folk traditions, but that doesn't mean I'm a folk practitioner. And if people are claiming they're a folk practitioner, but they're operating from that perspective of
Hmm.
nothing is true, everything is permitted, I don't know if that label is quite appropriate. That's all I will say about that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you for your perspective on that because it certainly, I was like, that's an interesting take.
Mhm.
But perhaps in line with modern trends, maybe people are discovering they can take folk magic into some weird directions, and all of a sudden they're a chaos magician.
Yeah, well, okay, so it's funny you bring this up because I just had a very similar conversation about this in my Discord server. We were talking about folk magic and what is folk magic and really trying to define this term because it is kind of a newer term. It's kind of a newer term to explain older practices, if that makes sense, because the people that were practicing it at the time didn't necessarily call themselves folk practitioners. That's just kind of a label that we have now evolved to use. Anyway, so the whole anthropology of that term in general is just really interesting. And I found myself needing to reel back my rigidity a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
I tend to be, even though I'm a chaot, I tend to be rigid sometimes. And I like to say that's not true, but really, I can't judge anyone else's practice. So if somebody wants to call them whatever they want to call themselves, that's fine. Do I think that that is real folk magic when you're operating from the chaos magic perspective? No, I don't, because folk magic is very much about getting into the folklore, the mythology, working with land spirits. It's really practical and down to earth. And sure, I guess there could be some parallels with chaos magic, but it's just not the same. I find that folk practitioners really do kind of prescribe more to like the spirit model or the energy
Mm-hmm.
model, things like that, especially when you get into folklore and mythology and learning all of those stories. And if you're only operating from the psychological model, which, or the meta model, which is very chaos magic, I would say someone is more of a chaot that's then being
Mm-hmm.
inspired by folk magic, like I mentioned. So, anyways, rant over
Yeah.
the, but
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you so much for your perspective on that. I really appreciate that. And I'm
sure.
sure our listeners will as well, definitely.
I don't have all the answers. I just want to claim that. Okay, people can call themselves whatever they want.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to seem super rigid. I'm trying my best not to be rigid, but yeah.
Yeah, and same here. I've definitely been known not to gatekeep labels.
Sure.
I am good with some of the more lax definitions of Thelemite because once again, um, a Christian who's never read the Bible and goes to church every Sunday, are they still a Christian? I would say
Sure.
yes.
Yeah.
I would say yes. And the same
Yeah.
goes for Thelemites. Why are we? What is the purpose, at least in the Thelemic realm, of putting up barriers for people to jump over to prove that they need to that they're worthy to be there? No, you don't need to prove to anyone you're worthy to practice magic. This is for you.
Mhm. Mhm. And terms evolve too over time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not. So, in the term folk magic or folk witchcraft or folk witch can definitely evolve over time. And who's to say what's what? And it's not like we have one defining body that's telling
Hmm.
us, you know? And I think some of the people in my Discord server really opened up my mind about this because you can still claim that you are a folk practitioner, but maybe not subscribing to all of the mythologies or all of the folklore that encompasses that particular region that you're studying. Sure, looking into it. And it's just an area, like I'm not a folk practitioner, I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to pretend to be. Well, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Awesome. So I think that about wraps up a lot of what we've been discussing. Are there any more
Yeah.
trends you'd like to talk about or things you got going on?
Oh my gosh. As far as trends go, I mean, astrology and tarot is always going to be a trend, but that's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much I can really, I actually just did a video reacting to, the trendy astrology videos and whatnot. So that's always going to be a trend. But I actually went to Michael's craft store recently, and it's so interesting to see how many crystal balls there are and tarot
Wow.
decks. And it's just so I would definitely say that that's trendy, and I actually kind of like it. I know the pros and cons. I hear both
Hmm.
sides, but I love that it's becoming a little bit more mainstream so that we're not as weird
Yeah,
to other
I love
people.
that as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
And I would love to eventually see some of those trends bleed into the southern United States where I am, or at least where I am locally,
Yeah.
because there still it seems like in the local venues there's some stigma around being an occultist, a witch even. I
Yeah.
heard tale that there's a local crystal shop who specifically doesn't allow witches to rent their space, and one of
What?
my friends is like, how about ceremonial magicians? And they're like, I don't know about that because they didn't know what a ceremonial magician was. But anyway, that's weird. The fact that I have not, there's been another bookstore, I won't mention which one, that allows new age women, I'm talking like yoga pants, crystals, new age, to
Hmm.
rent the space to teach tarot classes. They're allowed to do that. And so I was like, hey, can I teach the Thoth deck? And they're like, oh, not you. And so I'm like, okay, that sucks.
Wow.
So it's been a real challenge to find a space to teach occult things here locally in person,
Hmm.
which is wild. I have such whiplash because, like, getting flown up to New York to participate in this Richard Metzger documentary and like traveling all everywhere to give talks and presentations. I was blessed to give that talk in the UK at the Last Tuesday Society, you
Yeah.
know. That is to say, I gave it virtually, but the Last Tuesday Society is in the UK, just for clarification. But yeah, I feel like that's so cool. But like locally, it's like people are so scared of occultists and witches,
Hmm.
and it's not great. But I am so blessed that there is a local coffee shop who has really embraced us with open arms, embraced me with open
Oh,
arms, and is allowing me to teach that class on bibliomancy coming up. And yeah, they're so cool, and I love them. And thank you for making space for real occultists, not just
yeah.
love and light. I guess you can consider them
Wild.
real occultists, but I don't think they would consider themselves occultists. They just
No.
take our tools and use our stuff, and then get it wrong, and then exclude us from spaces.
That is so damaging. Okay, first of all, the crystal, so you said it was a crystal shop that was
Yeah,
not
there's a crystal
allowing.
shop locally. Yeah.
Wow, that
They
is
don't allow
wild.
witches to rent their space. And I don't know what the story is there. Like I'm getting the second hand. The bookshop that banned me, no, that was a different place.
Hmm.
But yeah, I got that first.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's why we have to fly. That's why we have to, that's why I
Hmm.
went all the way to Georgia for a convention, which is so far from Washington State. That was so far. I mean, that's why we have to, like you doing the stuff in the UK and everything, is because
Hmm.
locally for all of us, it's such a struggle.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anywhere, although I do think that Seattle is a lot more open than a lot of other
Hmm.
places in the United States. I'm sure there's some places that would allow something like that. But even still, I mean, locally, I don't think I would have a place to go either.
Yeah.
That's wild to me. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, by the
Well,
way.
thank you. Yeah, but yeah, that sort of those experiences really sparked a few podcast episodes and everything, and videos and
Yeah.
such of me talking about like, hey, within the magical community, people really hate Thelemites for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, hey, let's talk about that. So yeah, that was a fun little detour in my life.
Yeah, yeah, that is very interesting. Yeah, I do think it's interesting with divination and or tarot or reading oracles or whatever is becoming more trendy because on one hand, like I said, I do like it, but then on the other hand, you have other people taking those things away from their original traditions and then trying to teach them to other people and then like you said, doing it incorrectly. That's just yeah, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah, it is really strange to me.
Mhm, mhm.
Because a lot of people don't realize how much Crowley is in the magic they do. Like they just have no idea.
Sure.
All Crowley to them is the boogeyman, right? Like he's like so that weird dude in the corner, and they don't even know why he's weird. They just repeat things they've seen on TikTok, and a lot of that Crowley is weird stuff is straight up homophobia. First of all, they
Mm,
did not like the man because he was doing sex magic and he was doing it with other men, and people were
mhm.
like, wow, that's gross, which it's not. Okay, so let's move on. It's 21st century. Let's go forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are some valid criticisms with Crowley, but I have yet to hear someone actually articulate one. I know them in my heart, though, so maybe instead of you've heard the phrase straw manning, right? Where someone like takes a crappy version of an argument and then attacks it.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So have you heard of the phrase brick manning?
No, enlighten
It's
me.
the opposite. It's where you take someone's argument and then you put bricks on it to make it a better argument. That's like gonna be like me and Crowley one day. I'm like, hey, what you're saying is wrong, but if you said it like this, anyways. I,
Interesting.
but
Interesting.
but the truth of the matter is, I have such weird whiplash because I
Yeah.
see people using parts of Crowley's rituals and writing in their work, and I'm like, I know where that's from. But that person hates Crowley. But that person hates Gerald Gardner, and I'm like, ooh, wow, that's
Yeah.
fun. Or that
Yeah.
person just hates Thelemites, which is a whole nother conversation. And we have a word for that if you hate someone just because of their religious beliefs, and that's bigotry. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Preach. Preach, sister. I love it. I love everything that you've brought up today. This has been a wild conversation, and I'm
yeah,
here
this has
for
been really great. And it's
it. Thank
so
you for
wonderful to catch up with you. And thank you so much for coming on today. I think it's been really valuable to just share our perspectives and kind of where we're at. It's always nice to talk to another magical practitioner.
I love these kinds of conversations that are a lot more chill, where we can just flow and talk about whatever comes up. And I always love our conversations anyways. And I adore you. And I think you're a brilliant
Yes.
mind. I'm so grateful you're in the YouTube space because there's not very many people talking about what you're talking about.
Oh,
So
thank
yeah,
you.
I think it's really
I
valuable.
adore you so much too, and really value
Oh,
your perspective and your energy you bring to everything. So it's always a
thanks.
pleasure to talk to you on video or off. So thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me here, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much to all of our viewers and listeners today. As always, I am the center of expression for the primal will to good, and so are you. Thanks, everyone.